Hello everyone, so I've just finished painting up the final units of my Ancient Britain 2mm army, so I've now got sufficient figures to play the Watling Street scenario from the Strength and Honour rulebook. I've played Strength and Honour a couple of times down at my local War Games club. That was some time ago now. Last time I played was back in January. It's now August. Quite a lot has happened in the interval. So I've played a kind of game solo just yesterday, just to refresh my knowledge of the rules, but I am going to be a little bit rusty, I'm afraid, so forgive me if I do make errors, or particularly omissions. I realise it's quite easy to forget unit characteristics, for instance, and how they can change the rules slightly and so on. So I'm hopeful that I'll be able to give you a pretty fluid battle report anyway. So as I say, I'm going to play Battle of Watling Street. I printed out these orders of battle and unit characteristics and so on, so that I can refer to them a little bit more easily. But the first thing to note is that Strength and Honour is played on a sort of table top that is divided into squares. Now this is my mat here, and believe it or not, it is marked off. There are little crosses at various spots, but they're so finely printed, I mean intentionally so, that you probably won't be able to pick them up on the camera. But anyway, they're divided, so there's a cross there, another one there, and one there. Yeah, they're very hard to pick up. So that is a box. Those four, they're the four corners of a square, but that actually represents 4 squares, not 1 square, because it's pretty easy once you can see the outline there to work out that within that area there are 4 smaller squares, so it saves you putting a lot more crosses on the map. But the point I'm trying to make about this scenario, and in fact all the other ones in the book, is that they suggest at the beginning of the rule book that a normal playing surface is 24 squares by 16. So in other words, 12 by 8 in terms of the markings on the table, but it's 24 boxes by 16 boxes. So this would be the 24 square length, and this would be the 16, obviously. Now, if you actually look at this with a ruler, you'll see that the image is about 7 inches, or about 17 centimeters across. So it's not the image on the page has been put there to fill the page aesthetically, but it's very hard, because you don't see any markings on here, to work out exactly how long, for instance, the Iceni deployment zone is in terms of boxes. Fairly obviously there's an equal flanking zone on either side, so I think it's fairly kind of open to interpretations, this map, and this is exactly the attitude I've adopted. So I'll show you in a moment what I've done with the scenery and the table and so on. But just to point out an example of that, it says that the Romans deploy in the strong position on the hill, and the terrain is a large hill with a defile and thick woods on either side of the Roman side of the battle. So I'm assuming that the woods are on hills themselves, and the defile goes through the centre there. And it's interesting that they use the phrase thick woods, because a wood can occupy up to 7 squares. Let me just pause the camera a moment to check that. Yeah, sorry, 9 squares. I thought it was 9, and so when I said 7, that's why I hesitated and had to check it. Yeah, so a wood can be up to 9 squares. Now, there's no such thing in the terrain descriptions of thick woods, but to me, these woods look like they occupy more than 9 squares on the table. This is my point about how the boxes aren't marked off on this. If that's the case, then they're not thick woods, they're actually forests, and it changes the nature of how they affect troop movements and so on. Cavalry, for instance, can't go into forests at all, whereas they can go into woods. They have difficulty, it's rough terrain, so all units have difficulty moving through woods, but nevertheless, cavalry can go into a wood but can't go into a forest. And this is quite important because there are elements of cavalry on the ancient Britain side, and obviously it would be preferable for them to be able to envelop the Roman flank. So I'm going to say that I'm going to use woods rather than forests, and only having them occupying a space up to 9 squares in size. And let me show you on the table how I've interpreted this terrain deployment. Let's sort of turn the camera off and then show you it by hand. Okay, so this is one of the woods. This one is occupying 9 squares, so it's 1, 2, 3 squares by 1, 2, 3 squares. So that's the maximum size that wood can be. And then there's another one up this end of the table. So this is the Roman side of the battlefield, and this one is 1, 2 by 1, 2, 3, 4 squares, so it's 8 squares in size. And the Roman deployment zone is going to be from the mat edge to that point there, and then across to there. And this defile, I've changed all this a little bit. I don't think it matters a great deal, but I think you can see there's a slope in the table there. So there, and another one just here, not so obvious on the camera. And then right across the table, about midway, slightly under midway, there's a sort of steeper drop here. So there's a hill right across the table, and in the centre of that hill there's a sort of slightly lower area, so the edges of the hill are higher still. But really, to be honest, that has very little influence on the game, other than if you're charging down a hill, it gives you a bonus. But the hills really have very little, sort of impact on the game. And over this side of the table, this is the Britain's deployment zone. They have a wider deployment zone and a deeper deployment zone. So the table edge is here. That's one edge of the deployment zone there. This is the other one here. The stream that you can see now is really there just for scenic effect. It's the scenario states that the stream has no effect on the battle, but I am going to say that it's going to be a normal stream, which is kind of like a linear obstacle. But even that isn't really going to have much effect on the game, unless there is some kind of rout of the Britons, maybe. But even then, I think if you're being pushed back over rough terrain and so on, it doesn't have any effect on your movement. So the stream isn't really going to matter at all. But the table is very kind of bare. I suppose I could make it look a lot more attractive by flinging bits of random terrain down that aren't going to matter in the battle. But this is it. This is what we're going to be playing with anyway. So on to the setup of the game. Okay, so each side have a command board. This is going to be the Britain one, and the Britain army has a breakpoint of 18, so I've already put that down. Now they start off with 2 command points and 2 generalship points. So the generalship points we can put down in the generalship box straight away. But they also have to consult the auguries to get more command points. So I'm going to roll 2 dice, and I rolled a 5, and that's not very good at all. That only gives them an additional 2 command points. So they have now 4 command points which they can place on this board. Now it does. This is quite there is a lot of strategy involved in where you decide to put these command points, and also how you choose to deploy your army at the beginning of the game. The game can be won or lost almost at this stage, but I'm going to do this fairly swiftly, just for the sake of not turning it into it is going to be a long video, but trying to keep it down to a minimum. So I'm going to put 1 in each of those boxes. I haven't got a lot to play with, so we're going to put 1 in each of those boxes, and that's the Britain's sort of command board set up for the moment. Okay, now the Roman army has a much lower break point, only 13. It's a far smaller army, which is the main reason why that's the case. And they start off with 3 command points rather than the 2 that the Britons started off with, and 2 generalship points, like the Britons. The Britons are commanded by Boudicca, and the Romans by Paulinus. Now, same again, we have to roll to consult the auguries. Let's hope we do a bit better than the Britons did. Not really, no. 5, so that's only an additional 2 command points as well. So they end up with 1 more command point than the Britons. Now, in terms of strategy, there's not really much for the Romans to think about. So I'm not going to put any counters in the strategy box. So I'm going to put 2 in defence, 2 in attack, and 1 in movement. And that's how we'll leave the Roman command board. The generalship points can be moved to any of those boxes, by the way, so there are other reasons why you might want to use the generalship points, but you can kind of reconfigure your strategy a little bit, your tactics, as it were, by spending generalship points. There are other ways you can spend those points, though, which you might consider more important during the game. But let's get on now to the deployment of the armies. Okay, now first thing each side has to do is put down their baggage camp, as it were. In this scenario, the Romans don't actually have a camp. They're the two legions that Paulinus has marched speedily down from Anglesey, where he was suppressing the sort of druidic uh, insurrection, and he's now marched two of those legions down Watling Street in order to deal with Boudicca's rebellion in the southeast. So anyway, on the photograph in the book, there is a suggestion that the camp is placed about here. It doesn't say in the setup that you have to have it in the example, as per the example in the book, but I'm going to do that anyway. So I'm trying to be a little bit careful here that it occupies. I can see across there. So it's going to be in those two squares, one there, like that. And then now we get on to deployment itself, and the side with the most units begins to deploy. You alternate one unit at a time, so obviously the Britons vastly outnumber the Romans, so they have to deploy a unit first of all. So I'm going to put down a unit here, and you can see straight away now that the base sizes don't, aren't the same dimensions as the boxes. As long as it's clear which two boxes the unit is based in, that's fine. And then there are additional things that you have to tack onto these bases, like skirmisher lines and reserve lines and things like that. So they do fill a greater area as the deployment progresses. Anyway, so now that's going to be a unit of Iceni, a warband. There are two Iceni warbands. I'll have to state that because the Trinovantes and the Atrebates actually have slightly different factors and characteristics, so I'm going to make it clear from the beginning that that is an Iceni warband. And now we go over to the Romans for the first of their units to deploy. So I'm now going to deploy the first of the Roman legions. Now I've got various options here, and as I say, a lot of the decisions you make at the start of the game can really affect how the game plays out. So in the game that I rehearsed before filming this, I actually opted, so this is a Roman legion base. I actually opted to swap that out for a Roman legion that was deployed in what is known as single aces, so on two bases, so that it forms a wider frontage, and each one of those is now a separate unit. Obviously the big advantage of that is that it spreads the width of the army out, makes it harder for the Britons to get round the flanks of the army. But you do lose one of the characteristics of the Legion in Triple Aces has, which is the battle-trained characteristic, and also their discipline rating diminishes, and if at any point in the game they cease to be line abreast, then their discipline goes down even further. So I'm going to sacrifice the width and in this game see how it plays out, deploying it fairly far forward at the edge of the deployment zone there as a single legion. Okay, and again I can see across there, so I know it's in a square there and a square there. Right, now we go back to the ancient Britons. Okay, now this is the edge of the deployment zone here, but having deployed the first unit within the deployment zone, the only rule I have to obey now is that the next unit I put down is adjacent to that last unit that I put down. So I'm going to put down another unit, another warband of Iceni directly in front of it, so that is now outside of my deployment zone. But that is still quite a good formation, because normally in combat units only give support to units to their side, but warbands are allowed to give support to other warbands if one is behind the other. So the warband behind can support that warband if it comes into combat. So that is a sort of self-protecting kind of deployment there. And then we go back to the Romans. Okay, so you just about make them out on this table, but I've deployed a second Roman legion alongside that first deployment there, so that's pretty straightforward choice, because as I say, they can give support to one another if they're side by side but not in front of one another. So now we go back to the Britons to decide on our next unit to deploy. Okay, now the choices are beginning to sort of pile up now, and as I say, decisions you make now can have a massive impact on the game later on. That was the last unit that I put down, so I've got a choice now. I can put my next unit down either there, or there. My initial kind of feeling is that because the Romans are deploying in that direction and will be obliged to put their next unit down somewhere in that direction as well, it would be sensible for me to be deploying this way, so that I can build up a kind of overlap to get round their flank. Now, the other thing that I've got to consider is that the Britain's army has got a large number of units that can be broken up into smaller units and put into neighbouring units as skirmisher lines and reserve lines. So for instance, this is a unit of skirmishers, so I'm going to put that down on the table there, but I need to put it somewhere, if I am going to break it up, and I probably am, that I can spread the units. I can pass them out to neighbouring units, including diagonally. So by putting it there, I'm deploying towards the opposite direction of the way the Romans are deploying, and if I break it up, it will break up into 4 skirmisher lines, so I could put them all against one or other of those, or 2 on each, or 1 on each and 1 on each of 2 more units that I deploy that way. So I think that's what I'm going to do for the time being. And then in terms of the Romans, there isn't really, as I say, there's not going to be a lot of strategy involved. It's just a matter of surviving, breaking the initial attack. So I think I've only got 2 more auxiliary units to put down, so I'm going to put another auxiliary unit on the right flank of that unit legion that you can see there. Right, there we are then. So there's a unit of veteran Roman auxiliaries positioned there now, and you can also notice there's a small cavalry reserve attached to them as well, which is allowed in this scenario. So that's the Roman deployment. So now we're back to the situation over here, and I have to put a unit adjacent to this, so it could either be forward or to the right or behind that unit there. Okay, so it is possible to overthink all this, and there are so many options, so I'm not going to spend too much time cogitating. I'll just put another unit down there, which is a unit of light cavalry. Now they have similar properties to the skirmishers in that they can be broken up into 4 strips of cavalry skirmishers and put against adjacent units. So what I've got in mind is to put my light chariots over that flank and then break that light cavalry down into skirmishers and have the skirmishers skirmishing for the light chariots. See how that works. Now, in terms of the Romans, as I say, they've only got one more unit, and it has to be put down adjacent to that unit of auxiliaries there. I'm not sure if if that will be within the deployment zone if I put it alongside it. I'll just go and check that. No, there was only one square within the deployment zone, and the units are 2 squares in width. So I've had to put the final Roman unit down, which is another unit of veteran Roman auxiliaries with a small cavalry reserve, just sort of slightly behind. And then once the game begins, I'll have to try and manoeuvre that unit so that it's in line with the other units there. So it's an example of how you can misjudge things, you know, from the very beginning. Had I put that Roman legion there down one square further along, then it would have been room for them all to fit. I didn't make a very good decision there. But anyway, we'll get around that. So now there's a lot more units to put down, but they're all from the ancient Britons, so I can show you that with a little bit more pace now. Right then, so I'm going to put down a unit of light chariots adjacent to those light cavalry. And then another unit of light chariots behind those. And then I'm going to spend, if we remember, on the battle board I had put a token into the strategy pool, so I'm going to spend that at this point, and that allows me to break the deployment order. So I can now put down another warband over here and don't have to obey that rule about placing it adjacent to the last unit put down. Trying to work out the squares here. There's one there, corner there, so that's in there. And then I do have to start now, and the next one has to go down adjacent to the last one put down. So I can put another warband down there. It's not really necessary. They're either going to be Trinovantes or Atrebati, but they both have the same characteristics, so there's nothing to distinguish them. But again, because they're warbands, the one behind can support the one in front. And then we're going to put another warband down there, and another one there. So that is the deployment kind of done, except now we have to. The Romans don't have any units that where this is applicable, but the Britons have a lot. So as I say, I'm going to start to break up some of those I could do it with the light chariots, but I'm not going to. I'm just going to do it with the skirmishers and with the light cavalry. So I'm going to break that up into 4 strips of skirmishers. Just turn the camera off for a moment while I get these ready. Right, so I've got them ready there. So the skirmishers I can replace with 4 strips of skirmishers, and then deploy them into any suitable units that they are adjacent to, and that includes now diagonally. So I'm going to put 2 strips with this warband here and 2 with this warband here. You can only have 1 line in the front actually skirmishing, so there's going to be 1 line there, and then 1 line is a reserve line behind, and similarly 1 reserve line and 1 skirmishing line there. So squeeze them all together, but that's obvious to me what I'm doing, so I know what they all refer to. And then the same thing here, I'm going to take this light cavalry unit off and replace it with 4 strips of light cavalry. As I said, I could have done that as well with the light chariots, but I'm going to keep them as 1 unit. But if I did it with light chariots, they would only break down into 3 strips. And you can also do it, there aren't any in this game, but you could do it with elephants, but elephants will only break down into 2 strips. Okay, so I'm going to put same again, 1 in reserve, 1 in forward skirmishing for that unit, and 1 in reserve, and 1 behind. Obviously you have to have things that can move at the same speed, so I wouldn't have been able to put an infantry skirmisher unit against the chariots, which count as, you know, as cavalry. Okay, and then finally we have to put the generals on the board. So I've got a minuscule model of Boudica here, which you certainly won't be able to see, and it only seems right to put her with the Iceni. So you could put her in a square in her own right, or you can attach them immediately to a unit. So she is going to be with that warband in the forefront there. And then I've just got to do the same thing now with a little model of Paulinus, and he's going to go in that sort of more central of the 2 legions there. Okay, now in some games you would roll to decide who was the attacker and who was the defender. I think in this scenario it's pretty obvious that the Britons are going to be the attackers. So the attacking side get the first phase of each turn. So we're going to start with moving the Britons. Now the way movement works is that you roll a d6, add modifiers for certain units. So in the case of these light chariots, I would add 2 to the dice, and then you refer to a table, and the score will tell you how many squares or how many movement points you have. And in general, a movement point is 1 square, but you have to sacrifice movement points if you're doing a manoeuvre, if you're not just doing a straightforward movement forward. So, and also, if you have 2 similar units, one behind the other, you can move them both with the same dice roll, and that's quite important because you do get drift, you get separation of units and so on, so that helps to keep the units together. So let's see what we roll. Not very good. I've rolled a 1, so normally I think I'm just going to check this. As I say, I'm not entirely sure on a lot of these rules. I think I still add the modifier, but possibly a natural 1. Yeah, it does. A natural 1 stops me moving at all. I don't need to check that. Now that's a bit of a problem, because if I roll another 1 consecutively for the next movement, that's considered to be a reversal of fortune, so the play will then go over to the Romans. So I'm now going to do that's them having failed. I'm now going to try and move those 2 Iceni warbands forward there together. See how we get on with that. Anything but a 1. It's a 4. Okay, now they don't have any modifiers, so that's a score of 4, and that allows them to move 2 squares forward, which is, remember, is 1 kind of box on this grid. So that is 1 square, that is 2 squares. So the whole lot can move up that way. You can see them having moved. Sorry, I was off camera when I did that. Now I'm going to move, or I'm going to attempt to move these 2 units here. Oh, another thing I should say about warbands is I did move that its maximum distance. You don't have to normally move the maximum distance if you don't want to. It would be nice to try and keep these line abreast, but warbands have a particular rule where they have to move the maximum distance towards the nearest enemy unit. So if you activate them for movement, that is, you could leave them still, not try to activate them, but if you do activate them for movement, they have to go fully forward as far as they can towards the nearest enemy unit. Right, they've rolled a 5, which again is another 2 squares. So that's quite, handy, because it allows me to keep them line abreast. And then we're going to roll for this last pair here. And that's a 3, which is only 1 square forward, but it's not a huge problem, particularly at the moment while they're not in contact. But I've got the sort of support for 1 unit behind the other. So that is the end of the Britons phase of the turn. So now we'll go over to the Romans. I'm sort of in 2 minds with this. I could move the Romans forward so that they are kind of on the brow of that hill, which will give them a kind of uphill advantage possibly. But I think I'm going to be cautious at this point, because I don't want to kind of break up this linear formation. What I want to try and do is strengthen it by moving that one. I can do a manoeuvre and move it obliquely so that it ends up there, but I need to test for that. So the first thing I have to do anyway is to roll a dice to see how many movement points they get. So let's put the right, that's good. That gives me 3 movement points, and it would take 2 movement points to do that particular manoeuvre. But now I have to do because it's a manoeuvre and not a straightforward move, I have to do what's called a manoeuvre test. And the Roman auxiliaries have a are quite manoeuvrable. I've only got to get 2+ on a dice, so as long as I don't roll a 1, I'll be okay. I roll a 6, so that is fine. I can do that. So they can do, you're not allowed to manoeuvre backwards, but they can do that, oblique move. So that's tidied the line up. That's 2 movement points. I have still got 1 more, but I don't want to use it. As I say, if it was a warband, it would have to move forward, but because they're more disciplined troops, I can leave them where they are. So that's the end of the Romans' turn. I'll hand it back over to the Britons. Okay, so I'm going to have another go at moving those 2 units of light chariots together, just moving them forward. Another one. Right, well at that point then I am going to say that, I'll tell you what I could do maybe is move, where are they? Over there. Move those 2 warband units that are slightly staggered backward, try and move those forward and hope that I just move them 1 square so that I get the whole lot back into a nice neat cohesive formation. It's a 2, so that'll give me exactly what I wanted, which is just 1 square of movement. And then I'm going to hand the turn back to the Romans, but I don't think the Romans are going to want to do anything. Let's have a think about this. Yeah, what I'm going to do is, now that I've got them into a neat formation, linear formation, I could just leave them there, wait for the warbands to crash into me, but I'm going to spend the command point that I've got on the movement box of the command board and then move everything that is in contact, in edge-to-edge contact, that hasn't been activated, which is the whole army, move them forward as a single body, which I can do by spending that command point. So let's see how far they go. So it's not very far, it's only one square, but at least that gets them a little bit closer to that lip. So I want to try and get into combat with the warband before the light chariots get around my flank. That's what I'm thinking. So 1 square forward. And there we are. It's back to the Britons. I'm just going to do exactly the same again. Try and get those chariots to move forward. So it's die roll +2. Another one. Quite extraordinary. Okay, now I am not, or am I? Yeah, I'm not going to activate the warbands, because it's getting into the situation now where I'm getting perilously close to the Roman line, and I really want to, before the warbands go toe to toe with the legions, I really want to get those chariots to threaten the rear or the flank. So I'm going to leave it up to the Romans now. and half knowing my thoughts is difficult when you're playing both players, but I think now it's sensible for the Romans to continue to advance forward, except that they can no longer go forward as a body. But we'll take the risk at this point, I think, to try and get to the edge of that hill. So we'll start with the legion up this end here, 3, which is 1 movement point. So he's going to go forward 1. So that means no matter what I roll for the others, as long as I don't roll a 1 and foul, so the next legion along, I only want to move them 1 square forward so that they're line abreast. So that's 2 is another, yeah, that's another 1, and then the auxiliaries to their right is another 1, and the auxiliaries to the right of them is a 6, so that would be more than 1, but I don't want to move them any further forward than the rest of the line, so they are all going to move forward 1 square. Had that been a warband, it would have been obliged to go further forward, but it's not. Okay, and then back over to the light chariots there, see what they can get. So it's a dice roll +2. Yeah, they finally got going. So d6 +2 is 8. That gives them 4 movement points. So I'm not going to attempt any manoeuvres or anything at this point. It's made up slightly for their previous hesitancy. So they can now go forward 1, 2, 3, 4th one. Try and find the crosses on the table there. 4. Because of the slope in the table, they're not going to necessarily stay where I put them. Okay, so you can see those just going up the slope of the hill now. So now got this problem that the chariots it might take them a little while to manoeuvre and turn and so on. They are very inflexible and manoeuvrable troop type though. So they are going to begin to threaten this flank. And as I say, because we're talking about an entire legion here, this is on a very grand scale. I can't refuse a flank because you can't move backwards, so I couldn't even attempt to make a manoeuvre like that. It's not allowed in the rules. So yeah, I think the only option is to try and get stuck in. So I'm going to start to move them as a body, starting with the legion on the left there. Three is 1 square. Let's roll for the others as I go along. So the next legion along, 4 would be 2 squares, but I want to keep them side by side, so I'm just going to move them forward 1. Then the first of the auxiliaries is 1 square, which is alright, and 1 square again. So I can move all 4 units forward 1 square. 1, 1, 1. and now they're in a good position on the crest of the hill there now, so that does give them some advantage if they're charging downhill. Yeah. Okay, let's think about this now. I'm going to move these, attempt to move these forward even further so that they are well behind. Here's the Roman line here now. I want to get them well behind and then turn them to the left. So it's a d6 plus 2. Three plus 2 is 5, which gives them 2 movement points, which is 2 squares if they go straight forward. Right, so where's the cross? It's really hard to see on some parts of the map. I think that's it there. Okay, and think it makes sense to be patient now and leave those other warbands where they are until the chariots have got behind. So that means it sort of forces the Romans' hand now. They can either sit and wait for the chariots to attack them from behind, or they can go down the hill and attack the Britons. And I think that is what they're going to do. Now, the way to do this, I think, is to attack from this side first of all, because there's a little bit of an overlap here. So if I can move this unit down to here and then get that one to attack that unit first, this unit will be supporting that unit. So we're going to move this one forward first, and he wants to end up he wants to go forward 2 squares in order to be there. So I need to get a roll of 4, 5 or 6 in order for that plan to work. 4, yeah, that's great. So he can move forward 2 squares. Which takes him 1, 2. So he is in the adjacent square. It's just that the bases are slightly smaller than the size of the grid. Now, this is where it gets a little bit dicey, literally, because I need a movement of 2, and if I could just move up to that unit and then there wouldn't be a melee, but I actually want to get into contact, so I need to declare a charge. So I have to declare that before I roll the dice and see how much movement I get. And if I don't get sufficient movement, then it's a reversal of fortune, and the turn goes back to the Britons. So I need a 4, 5 or 6. I only get a 1. So that has failed, and it's a reversal of fortune, and I'm just going to see if there are any other consequences to that. No, there aren't any other consequences, so Now that's the reverse of fortune. Had I still got a movement command there, I could have re-rolled that roll, tried to get 4, 5 or 6 again, but I spent that movement command point earlier, so I can't. I could, suppose, let's just look in the rules, I could spend a generalship point. No, I can't. I could, if I had a general attached to that unit, I could spend a generalship point to move it point from there to there and try again. But the only other option I've got is with the generalship points is if it's not dealing with a unit that the general is attached to, is to move it to a strategy, and strategy wouldn't help me in this case. So we are definitely back to seeing if we can get the Iceni, not the Iceni, the light chariots. I think I'm going to start to manoeuvre them, and again you are allowed to manoeuvre as a block, but what I want to do is a left-hand turn now. So I'm just going to activate the front unit now, see how much movement points I get and whether that will allow me to manoeuvre. So it's a d6 plus 2. 3 plus 2 is 5. That gives me 2 movement points, so I can do a manoeuvre, and in order to do the manoeuvre I need to pass a manoeuvre test. So for light chariots I need to throw more than 2, and I get a 6, yeah. So that allows me to pivot this unit that way. For some reason the cross is, oh there's a cross there, yeah, so that's in exactly the right spot. So that works like that. Now this unit here, as I say, I can't turn it that way now because it would be occupying the square there, the 2 units occupying the same square, and you can't move backwards. So I think I will leave the light chariot for the moment, and we'll go over to here and see what the best thing to do over here is. And I think I'm going to attempt to manoeuvre. No, I'm not. What am I going to do? I'm going to stop at that point and hand it back over to the Romans, I think. Okay, that might not have been wise, but I've made that decision now. So now this auxiliary unit is going to have another attempt to charge that warband there. So they need to declare a charge first of all, and then see how many movement points they get. And that's enough. They get 5, which allows them to move 2, which means they can move into combat. And now you get to see how the combat works. Okay, so we're looking from the other side now, from the Britain side. So this is the warband under attack. It has a unit behind it which is allowed to give it support because it's another warband, and it has a unit to the other side which can lend support because that unit is not in the zone of control. I'll explain zones of control a little bit more later, but it's not in the zone of control of any of the other Roman units than the one that's doing the attack, which is permitted. And on the Roman side they have these auxiliaries that can lend support. So the Britons have got 2 supports and the Romans 1 effectively, and I'm not going to allow them charging downhill because the hill is now behind them. They're on the flat now, so although they did come downhill, I don't think that counts as charging downhill. Some may disagree with me, I don't know, but that's how I'm going to interpret the rules. Okay, so the Romans start off with a combat value of 4. So I'll just put some dice here to show you that. And the Britons start off with a combat value of 3, so they're not quite as effective in fighting. Then you add these modifiers, so where is that? +1 for each friendly unit of support not in an enemy zone of control. So the Romans have got 1, takes them up to 5, and the Britons have got 2, which also takes them up to 5. Now there are no other modifiers that apply as far as I can see, because there are no... Oh, hang on. I wonder if that cavalry reserve can be of use. Just going to pause the camera again for a second while I check that. Yes, that small cavalry reserve is going to come in useful. You spend it a bit like a token, so it can be used for several things, but one of the things it can be used for is to increase the combat value of the unit by 1 for the duration for this combat. So I'm going to take it off, spend it, and that is important because that now puts this up to 6. So had those 2 values remained equal, I would now have only rolled 1 dice, but as it's more than 1 but not double, I can now roll 2 dice. So I'm going to roll, let's roll 2 separate dice so that in case I need to refer back to that. So I roll 2 dice, and I can pick, the Roman side can pick which value they want to choose. So 4 would be a combat result of push back, and 5 would be a combat result of advance. Sometimes, I know it sounds like it seems like you would want to take the higher value, but sometimes you don't want to. I think in this case I do though. So 5 means that the defending unit is pushed back and takes a discipline test. If the defending unit has a skirmisher characteristic, the result becomes a stand, but they don't. Right, so I'm going to choose 5, so we're going to leave the 5 there. So the Britons do have the option, or don't have an option, they have the chance now to save that roll, but if they can roll a 5 themselves and then it negates it, but they don't, they roll a 4. So let's work out what happens here. Yeah, sorry, I might not have been recording that, but I might have had the camera off when I was doing all that, but this unit got pushed back, the unit behind got pushed back with it. I then rolled a discipline test and I had to get 8 or more, and I rolled 8, so they passed their discipline test. So, so now the auxiliaries have to follow up unless they can pass the discipline test. And I don't think they want to follow up. So I'm going to try and roll a discipline test for them. Yeah, that's right. Just checking the rules to make sure I haven't forgotten anything. So they have got a discipline of 5 plus. So I'm just going to get 5 or more, and I get 8. So they can stay where they are. And I think now what I'm going to do is bring this unit here and try and charge them. So again, they need to declare a charge and then roll 2 movement squares, roll enough for them to move 2 movement squares. So let's see what they get. They roll a 2, which I don't think is going to be enough. Hang on a second. No, that's not enough. But this is the unit that has Paulinus himself attached. So normally that would be a reversal of fortune and the play would go over to the Britons. But I'm going to spend a generalship point on the Roman side and re-roll that dice. And this time I rolled a 4, which is sufficient for me to get into contact. Okay, so I've taken 1 generalship counter off of the Roman command board, and that successful reroll means that they are now in combat with this warband here. So let's work out the figures for that. Okay, the Britons start off with a combat value of 3 and the Romans 4. The Britons have got support behind and to the side, which means their value goes up to 5. The Romans have support to one side, which takes them up to 5 as well. Nothing else, so that is equal. So I didn't have that on camera. That is equal, and I don't have anything else that I can spend. There isn't a cavalry reserve or anything like that. But this remember now is a legion rather than an auxiliary unit. So they are battle trained, which means the result might be swing more in their favour anyway. So the upshot of that is it's equal. So I'm just going to roll 1 dice. See what I get. So it's a 4, which is pretty good. 4 is a pushback. So again, I'm just going to look something up in the rules. Yeah, the pushback isn't doesn't come in. The battle trained characteristic doesn't come into play with the pushback result, which is favourable to the Romans anyway. So we rolled to see how far back the Britons are pushed. Quite a long way by the look of it, but again, regardless of how far back they're pushed, they come into contact with the friendly unit behind. So, yeah, they're warband though, aren't they? So the warband will move as far, the warband behind will move back as far as the pushback. So a roll of 6 means they're pushed back 2 squares. So both of them go back 2 squares. 1, 2. 1, 2. Yeah, there was something else. I knew there was something else. Basically, I haven't brought them into play yet, but there are cards that you have to pick up when various mishaps happen, and being pushed back is one of those. So the previous unit that was pushed back should have picked up a setback card. Now this has got a value underneath it, but neither player is permitted to see what that value is. So that is, I'm picking that up for the previous pushback. I'm going to put that next to the Britain's board, and then we pick up a second one for this pushback. So they now have, the Britons now have 2 setback cards. I think their values can be anything from 0 to 3. So I've got to get, the Romans have got to get them over 18 to break the army. Okay, and then do the Romans want to follow up? No, they don't if they can avoid it. So they have to roll a discipline test and roll 5 or above. And they roll an 8, 6 and a 2. So they don't have to follow up. And that's the end of that conflict. So now I'm going to try and continue this success here by bringing up that final Roman legion and charging there. So again, they need to declare a charge and hopefully get enough to move 2 squares. So they roll a 6, yeah, that's fine. So they now move into contact. Sorry, not the camera. They now move into contact, and they have 1 support, and the warband has 1 support. So they both have 1 support, but that means that the Romans start on a combat value of 4. Oh, hang on, these are Iceni now. So do they have a higher combat value? They are slightly fiercer tribe. No, they don't. They only have a combat of 3. So that means that the Roman combat value is 1 more than the Britons, which means they roll 2 dice and can choose whichever one they prefer. Okay, so 2 is grind and 3 is stand. So I think we're going to go for the 2 because in a grind both the attacking and defending units are pushed back and each take a discipline test. This is a reversal of fortune, but the battle trained characteristic of that legion says when a grind result is rolled in combat activation, the battle trained unit which is defending. Right. So maybe we don't want to do that then. Maybe we want to go for 3. Maybe we want to go for the 3, which is a stand. inconclusive fight with no effect. Yeah, so we'll call it that. Sometimes, even though there's no effect, it is worth rolling the defence dice to see if it matches, because if it were to match and you'd say both been pushed back, then it would have negated that, if that makes sense, but it doesn't apply in this case anyway. So there we go, that was an inconclusive fight, but it's ended up quite nicely for the Romans with them all in a line, which is perfect sort of formation really for them, and with the light chariots still quite a long way off. So what they want to do now is keep pushing the warbands back before the light chariots can get to them. But it is now the Britons' go, so the first thing they're going to do, I think, is activate to move those light chariots. So this unit here simply has to move forward. So we'll roll from, see what distance they can travel. So roll a 2 plus 2 gives them 4, which is 2 movement squares. Okay, give these. Right, so they will move up to there. And then this unit here, I'm going to roll to see what movement allowance they get, and then if they get sufficient, I'll be able to manoeuvre them. Otherwise, I don't have to move them if I don't want to with them. So they roll a 2, so again that gives them 4, which is 2 movement points, which is sufficient to manoeuvre if they pass their manoeuvre test, which is 2 plus, I believe. Nice and nimble, yeah. Chariots, yeah, and they rolled a 5, so they are permitted to do a manoeuvre, and they're going to do a turn, which means they turn like that. Let's check that they're... Yeah, there's across that. Okay, and then over here, these are already in combat. Well, they're not in combat, but they're in contact. So I can simply announce that they're fighting. Oh, by the way, what I should have been doing, I didn't do it for the Romans and I didn't do it for the Britons in the last round, was to roll and see if the generals were injured. Oh no, I didn't need to, because they don't need to roll in combat, but they do if they're affected by a pushback or something like that, or a defeat in combat, so it didn't apply. But I have to try and remember that. Okay, so they just have to declare a combat. They don't need to roll to see how if they're moving or anything. So we can work out again that they have a combat value of 3 plus 1 is 4, and they have 4 plus 1 is 5. So in this case, the Britons are going to roll 2 dice, but this is the first example where the opposite side, are going to choose which number they pick. Right, so they roll 2 5s, so they're going to pick 5. 5 would be an advance, but the Romans have the option of negating it. which they failed to do. So an advance means the defending unit is pushed back and takes a discipline test. If the defending unit has... No, right. And the battle-trained characteristic only applied to the grind result, if I remember correctly. Yeah. So that Roman legion is going to get pushed back, and they are going to get pushed back a certain distance depending on this roll. 3 is a pushback of 1 square, and then they have to take a discipline test. They get a setback card, which I'll put on their board before I forget. They take a discipline test, and their discipline is quite good. They've only got to get 5 or above. They just manage it. And yeah, that's everything. So not such a good result for the Roman side in that, but it is the Britain's turn, so I suppose it's only right and proper. Just want to look one other thing up as well. Excuse me a moment. Yeah, I did make a mistake there, but it was quite a good result for the Britons anyway. But I'll just show you. I'll just do another roll, and if I get a better result for the Britons, we'll go by that. But otherwise, I'll let that stand. So what I failed to do was add a point on for the Britons having a skirmish line in front of them, which would have meant that it was an equal roll, and the Britons would have got to choose, not the Romans. So let's just see what they would have rolled just with 1 dice. 3, so that wouldn't have been as good. So as it turned out, even though I made a mistake, the outcome worked out more in the Britons' favour, so we'll go with that. Okay, so they get moved back 1 square, and then what I have to do now is roll to see. I don't have to roll for the general because it wasn't a setback for them, but I do have to roll to see if any of the skirmish or reserve lines were removed during that fight, and they're removed on a roll of 1 to 4. It's quite extreme. So the skirmish line to begin with, yeah, they come off, and the reserve line come off as well. So even though I'd corrected the mistake, that's the way I should have played it. So both of those lines are removed from play now. Okay, now do I want the Britons to follow up? I think I do. So I don't need to roll for a discipline test. Just need to roll to see how far they follow up. I roll a 6. Yeah, there's another reason why I do want them to follow up, which I'll show you in a moment, because this is to do with the Iceni's characteristic. So they follow up like that. Now, normally they would just remain in contact until the next turn, but the Iceni tribe, so one that warband and the other Iceni warband, have the frenzied characteristic. In the book it's described as fanatic, but there isn't a fanatic characteristic, so I think they must have been frenzied, and that means they now fight another round of combat. So that's why it was important to see whether those skirmishers had been killed in the last combat, because otherwise they would have they would have been able to add to the modifiers in this combat. Okay, so the Iceni start on 3 and the Romans on 4, and now neither side has any supports at all that I can see, and they don't have any, so it's an advantage to the Romans. So the Britons roll 2 dice, but the Romans choose which figure they want to pick. So they will want to pick the lower one, the 3, and 3 is a stand result, which means that it's inconclusive and nothing else happens. No effect, yeah. Okay, so it's still the Britons' turn. I'm losing track a little bit of what I've done, but I think so far I've only moved the light chariots and engaged in combat with this warband here. So the next thing I'm going to try and do then is move this warband forward, and they will only be able to move forward not quite sure how this moving as far forward as they can go means. If they move sufficiently enough, then they might be able to manoeuvre that way and attack that unit there. So I think that's what they would do with the warband characteristics. So let's roll and see how much distance they get. 2. So that's only going to be 1 square, so that's solve that conundrum. They're just going to move forward 1 square, which is what I wanted them to do, because they're now supporting that unit again in the next combat. Okay, then I think what I'll do next is just move this warband here, these 2 here, forward as a unit, not declare a charge or anything, and hope that they only move 1 square, because I don't want them move. So they're not going to. They might move right up to, but they won't move into combat with them. But I'm hoping they'll just move 1 square and end up lined up there. So let's see what they get. I'm moving the 2 units together. No, 6 is 3. So they end up moving as far as they possibly can. So they are now in contact with them, but not in combat with them. So I might as well now move this unit here and charge them. Sorry, charge them. You didn't see that on the camera. So they get to roll 1 square, which is fine, that's just enough. They haven't taken the other one with them though. I don't think you can charge with 2 units. Let me just check that, because obviously I will do if I can. Yeah, again, I might have been misinterpreting these rules. You can certainly manoeuvre 2 units if one is behind the other and they're both similar. It doesn't actually say you can move them. So I might have been playing that wrong, but it seems to make sense to me that if they can manoeuvre together, then surely they should be able to move together. But you certainly can't charge together. So this unit has now successfully charged that unit, so we now have to work out that combat. So the Britons start on 3, and the Romans start on 4. The Romans have one support there, that's their support, but the Britons don't have any support because they've got nothing behind them, the diagonal doesn't count, and the one to their side is engaged and is in the zone of control of an enemy unit, and vice versa. So the Roman goes up to 5 and the Britons stay at 3. So again, this is a case where the Britons roll 2 dice, but the Romans get to choose which one they select. So there's a 4 and a 3. So I want to go for the 3, which is a stand. Yeah, so inconclusive fight, no effect. Okay, and I can keep going because I haven't had a reversal of fortune or anything yet. So this unit I can now try and activate to move up in support. And I rolled a 5, which is 2 squares, so that would be enough for a manoeuvre, but the manoeuvre would only take me 1 square effectively, so that is obeying this rule of moving as close to the enemy as I can. And then that is the end of the Britons' go, so it's now back to the Roman go. Right, so it's fairly even in terms of advantage here, and this is the main area of conflict now. But I think what the Romans are going to do is start over this end. Over this end they have 1 support and the enemy have 1 support, whereas the rest of these units, this unit and this unit, have no support, whereas the Britons have 1 support. So it's slightly to the Roman advantage over here. The other thing I could do maybe is attempt to manoeuvre around to charge these guys in the flank, which would be very effective if it was successful. But if I take a risk that that will fail, and then play goes back to the Britons. So I'm going to start here, see how I get on with the combat there. Okay, so Britons start with a combat value of 3, Romans with a combat value of 4, and both have 1 support, so it goes up to 4 and 5 respectively. Where is it? 5. And then nothing else to be taken into account. So the Romans can roll 2 dice and get to pick the higher of the 2, or get to pick whichever one they want. So 5 and a 2. So they're obviously going to go for the 5, and the Britons can negate that. No, they don't. They get a 6. They don't. If they beat it, doesn't matter. They have to get the exact number. So the result is a 5, which is an advance. So the defending unit is pushed back. So that means it will take a setback card. So I'm just going to put another setback card on their pile. They now have 3 setback cards. So they are pushed back and take a discipline test. So they roll to see how far the pushback is, and it's a 5, which means they go back 2 squares, and being a warband, that means that the warband behind them go back 2 squares as well. And then they take a discipline test, and their discipline is not brilliant. They've got to beat a discipline of 8, 8 or more on 2 dice, which is not easy. They rolled a 3 and a 4, so they failed their discipline test. Now, if you fail a discipline test, just going to check, but I think if you fail a discipline test, you take another setback card. No, I don't think so. I don't think you have to take another setback card for failing a discipline test. But what you have to do is roll on the failed discipline test table. So you roll 2 dice again. And in this case I've rolled a 6, which means that they are retiring. So the unit is disordered and it is turned to face directly away from the enemy. So I've turned them around to face away from the enemy, so they're facing that way now, and they get a disordered marker. The unit remains disordered until it passes a successful reform activation. The player collects an additional setback card at this point, so they do now get another setback card. If a retiring unit oh, that's interesting. So it did say when the defending unit is pushed back and takes a discipline test. So I would interpret that they are pushed back first of all, and then they take the discipline test. But it does say if a retiring unit is pushed back and contacts a friendly unit, the friendly unit is also moved back 1 space to allow the initial retreat to partially take place. A disordered marker is placed on the friendly unit and a setback card is collected. So, there's 2 ways of interpreting that. One is that they're pushed back first of all, which meant that one got pushed back as well, and then you take a discipline test which made them disordered. Or you could say that this unit is also pushed back because they are retiring, so it's the retiring. Yeah, I think that's the way to do it. So I think I'm going to put a disordered marker on these guys here as well, and also take another setback for that. That's a little bit ambiguous in the rules, I think, but seems perfectly valid way of doing it. So we put another disordered marker on them. Okay, now that was the Romans' first turn, wasn't it? So that's going well for them. So now, do they follow up? I'm going to say they don't want to follow up, so they have to pass a discipline test, which is 5+. They get a 7, so they can stay where they are. So now we're going to fight a combat here, and that means that they now have a support from this unit here, because they're not in the zone of control of an enemy unit. So they are going to fight against them. So they have 1 support, and the Britons have 1 support, which means 3 goes up to 4, 4 goes up to 5. So the Romans are going to roll 2 dice and pick the better of the 2. So they're both 4. which is an advance. No, it's not, is it? No, 4 is a pushback. Right, so pushback results in the Britons picking up another setback card. So they now have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 setback cards. So an average about 1.5 means that they've only probably got about, I don't know, 7 or 8 points there. How far do they get pushed back? One square, and because they're a warband, that other unit will go back 1 square with them. Yeah, so nothing else to do there other than to attempt to not have to roll a discipline test so that these guys don't follow up. So I want to try and keep them in line. So they need to get 5 or more. Just do it, 5, yeah, that's lucky. Okay, and then finally over here we now have, that's improved the situation for this conflict because this unit here is in the zone of control of this unit here. The zone of control of the 4 squares directly in front, so the 2 immediately in front and then the 2 diagonals. So as long as that unit isn't in the zone of control of an enemy unit, and it's not, it means that these are now in a zone of control, so it negates their support for this unit here. So that means both sides have, neither side has support, which means they are on 4, they are on 3. There are no additional bonuses or anything, any additional factors, so the Romans will roll 2 dice and pick whichever one they prefer. So they're both 3s, isn't that weird? So that is inconclusive, I believe. Stand. Yeah, an inconclusive fight. Yeah. So that is the end of the Roman turn, and it's back over to the Britons. Okay, a different perspective now. So just to show you, the first thing I want to do with the Britons is to roll to see how much movement allowance these chariots get, and I'm hoping they'll get enough that they'll be able to move forward and then manoeuvre so that they are directly threatening the back of this, the rear of this Roman unit here. So let's roll and see what they get. So they add 2 to this dice roll. Yeah, brilliant. So they get 8, which gives them 4. I think it's 4. Yeah, movement points. So I'll move them forward 2 to begin with. Find the crosses again. So there's a cross there. So they go forward 1, 2. And now I'm going to attempt to manoeuvre so they can turn that way. So they need to pass a manoeuvre test, which is they have to roll higher than 2 on a d6, so anything but a 1. Oop, get it in the tray. 3, yeah. So 1, 2. So they just turn. They're not going to move any further forward. But now they're only 2 squares away from being able to charge home in the rear of those guys, which could be fairly crucial to the battle. And then I'll try and move these other guys forward a little bit, get them into play later, so they can move. 3 plus 2 is 5, that gives them 2 movements points. So they're just going to move forward 2 squares. So they will move to there. Right, so that the light chariots might save the day for the Britons, depending how things go. So now, what are we going to do over here? I could initiate a combat here, but I'm at a slight disadvantage. I can't do anything with these guys until they've reformed. So I think I'm going to attempt to charge with this unit here, at that unit there. It'll still be a disadvantage, but it might then, if they remain there, it might help this battle here. So let's see, moving these guys forward into combat, so charge if I can get sufficient on the dice. 3 is 1 square, and that's all they need. I'll move them forward the 1 square. And then combat wise, they start off on 3, and now, oh yeah, no, they now have support from these people, because these are no longer in that one's zone of control, because that one is engaged in combat with this one. So they start from 3, go up to 4. These start off from 4 and go up to 5, and there's nothing else. So the Britons roll 2 dice, and the Romans choose which roll they prefer. So there's a 5 and a 4. Neither is brilliant. Yeah, I think I have to choose the 4, and they do have an opportunity to try and defend against that. So if they roll a 4, then it doesn't happen. No, they fail to. So the Romans are going to be pushed back, which means they take a setback card. I think it's only the second one they've got. Haven't got many. They then roll to see how far back they get pushed. Long way. They get pushed back 2 squares. Oh, that's bad news for them. Hang on. Oh no, it's not. No, I thought they were going to get pushed back into the enemy cavalry for a moment, but it's the other unit. So they go back 1, 2, like that. does the warband want to follow up? I think almost certainly it does, yeah. So how far do the Britons follow up? One square. So they don't maintain contact with them. But that's quite a nice result because it puts them alongside this unit here. If you were moving out of the zone of control of an enemy, normally you would have to roll to see if you can do it, but because they're following up, that rule doesn't apply. So that's why I haven't had that issue in this game yet. The zone of control makes it hard for you to leave. Right, so that's the end of that melee. So now we're going to fight another melee here. So don't have to announce a charge because they're already in contact. So the Romans have a combat value of 4. The Britons start on 3 but go up to 5 because they've got 2 supports. So it's now turning the Britons' way, so it's suddenly looking very dodgy because there's those skirmishers in the rear of the Roman line. So the Britons are going to roll 2 dice and they get to pick. Oh, 2 6s, so there's no choice there. So can the Romans negate that? Yes, brilliant. So that might have saved the day for the Romans. So that doesn't, it's just I think it counts just as an inconclusive fight. So nothing else to happen there. Then I will attempt next to move this unit forward so it can get back into support of those. So they will roll 2, which is only 1 square, but every little counts. So move forward 1 square. Now I'm going to try and start to reform these guys. So I have to check in the rules how you reform. I think you just pass the discipline test, but I'll just check that. Right, so the first thing I have to do is pass the discipline test, and they are 8+. So I need 8 or more. 7, no, failed it. So I now roll on the failed reform table. I rolled an 11. I just remain disordered, nothing else, because I rolled well. That could have been a bit of a problem. But that is a reversal of fortune. I was near the end of the Britons' roll anyway, turn anyway, but we now go back to the Romans. Right, I think I'll take a slight risk here and begin by attempting to charge this legion into that warband, and you'll notice that it is downhill, so they will get a bonus for that. But the risk I take is that if I fail to make contact, then the turn will switch back to the Britons. Okay, so I need anything but a 1. 4, brilliant. Okay, so they charge downhill, and they now have 0 support, whereas the the warband doesn't. Yeah, that's a Roman unit. So they're engaged. So there's no support on either side, but the Romans are charging downhill. I'll just check that again. Charging downhill is 1. Oh, I know what I haven't been doing is a warband undertaking a charge activation is one as well, so I might have been forgetting that. Right, yeah, no. So, try and do it correctly in the future, but Romans start on 4, go up to 5. Britons start on 3 and remain there, which means the Romans roll 2 dice and pick their preferred dice roll. So there's a 6 and a 4, so I think without doubt they'll go for the 6. So the Britons need to defend that, and they fail. I think at this point they will spend a counter off of their defence box. What they could have done was rolled an additional defence dice for a friendly unit, or a failed defence d6 maybe re-rolled. Yeah, so we'll say that they rolled 2 dice rather than re-rolling that one. So what do they need? 6? No, 1. So spent another command point for to no avail. So that means that it's a crunch, and the defending unit is pushed back and takes the discipline test. So the pushback will give them another setback card. Just put on their pile. How far do they get pushed back? 5 equates to 2 squares. So they make contact with, show you. They've gone back 1 and made contact with them, and these can go back another 1. So it's like that. And then they have to take a discipline test. So they need to get 8 plus. They only get a 6, which means they've failed their discipline test. So they then roll on the failed discipline test table. Oh, that's pretty good. They're rolling 11, so they are disordered. The unit is disordered facing the enemy, and a disordered marker is placed on the unit. This remains until the unit passes a reform activation. Player collects an additional setback card. So they're building up the setback cards now. I don't think either side has had a disaster card yet. But we put a a disordered marker on them as well. So it's pretty finely balanced. Over this side there's a lot of disordered Britons, but over that side that legion is imperiled by the chariots in its rear. But anyway, now I think we want to follow up with that unit there. So we won't attempt to take a discipline test. We will follow up, because if they can get in contact with that disordered unit before it reforms, then that's quite quite an advantage. So how far do they follow up? 3 is 1 square, so they don't manage to get into contact. So I'll just move them there. So there's a square gap between them. And yeah, that is the end of that one. So now That may not have worked out to the Romans' advantage there, because now, oh, I don't know. Got the choice now of either playing a combat here or yeah, because they will negate them. Don't think I've already fought a melee with that group this turn. Don't think I have. No, I haven't. So we're going to do that next. So they're already in contact. So Romans, don't think it counts as them charging downhill because they're already in contact. So the Romans start on 4. The Iceni warband, this is start on 3, and their support is negated. Where are they? I'll show you this. That support is negated because it's now in the zone of control of that legion. So they start on 3 and remain there. So Romans roll 2 dice and pick their preferred choice. So it's a 6 and a 3, so they're going to pick the 6. The Iceni fail to defend. So, how far back? So that's a pushback, and it's a crunch result. So the defending unit's pushed back and takes a discipline test. So how far back are they pushed? 3 is equivalent to 1 square. So the warband behind them go with them. They take a setback card for having been pushed back. The discipline test next. So the Iceni is 7+. No, only a 3. Wow. Failed discipline test. So they rout. Failed discipline test on 3. The routing unit makes an additional move away, moving the full distance rolled on the follow-up table. Any friendly unit whose zone of control is entered or moved through by the routers must make an immediate discipline test. Any failures resulting in them having to roll for a failed discipline test. Once the routing unit has moved and any discipline test caused by this has been carried out, the routing unit is removed from the battlefield. If the routed unit is infantry or cavalry, the player collects a disaster card. If the unit is a skirmishing unit, yeah. Okay, right, so let's go through all that. So they have to roll to see how far back they move, and every zone of control that they go through. So I'm not quite sure what happens if you route through. Oh, and this is oh blimey, this is Boudicca's in danger as well now. Moving reserve lines. Following up the generals. Oh yeah. Zone of control is entered or moved through. I think the warband behind moves back with them because this is kind of like a oh, so this is on the follow-up table, not on the pushback table. Not sure whether that's a typo or whether it doesn't matter. 2 to 4. Yeah, it's the same whether it's pushback and the follow-up tables are the same amounts anyway, so that doesn't matter. So we're rolled to see how far they get pushed back, first of all. Let's do it that way. So they go back 2 squares. So I'm going to play it as you would do with a pushback. That, of course, this is a warband here as well. That they go back 1, 2. They go back 1, 2. And I've gone through the zones of control of those and those. Sorry, you didn't say that. I've gone through the zone of control of them and them. So I have to roll discipline tests for both of those, and if they fail, roll on the fail discipline table. So I need 8 or more for the first one. No. So on the failed discipline table, they roll a 9. Well, this is getting. I think this is the collapse of the Britain Army now, because they rolled a 9, which means they are disordered, and they are disordered already, which means they rout. So they are now going to rout that way as well. So we'll have to do that in a minute, because this one here has to take a discipline test. Which is a 6. So they failed. And they rolled a 5, which is retiring. The unit is disordered. It's turned to face directly away from the enemy. So let me show you what I'm doing with that. So they turn to face directly away from the enemy, and they are disordered. Collect a setback card. So I've done that. Okay, so now they come off of the table, and I think we can leave Boudica on for a moment, but routing I take a disaster card, which are higher values than the setback card. So they've now got a disaster card. They have left the table. I think we'll now roll for Boudica herself. So unit with general routes, on a roll of 2 to 5, the general is injured. So we roll 2d6. Two to 5 and she's injured. No, she's alright, got away with that. Okay, so she is now on her own in a square, which she can now move and attach herself to other units and so on. So now we've got to do the route here, because they routed. Right, so again we roll on the follow-up table to see how far they route. 2 is 1 square. And again, I think that pushes them back there. They move through the zones of control of these two guys here. I think it did say in the scenario that the army, the British Army, is brittle, and this is proving it. So let's take a discipline test for this guy here, unit here. So they need 8 or above. 8, they got it. And then for this one here, 5. So they failed. So they roll on the failed discipline test table, and they've rolled a 3. So they rout as well. So don't think it matters really that they're not going to pass through any zones of control other than possibly the wagon lager here. So we'll check that in a minute. So I'm going to take them off the table. So that is a disaster card. Them off the table because they've finished their route now. So that is another disaster card. And then I think we do need to take a discipline test for the wagon lager. Yeah, 7+. They do have a discipline rating, so we'll do that. And they get double 4, so that's 8, so they pass. Okay, phew, right. So I think that is everything other than we can follow up with that Roman legion, I think, now, in order for them to move away from those chariots that are threatening them. So they move 1 square, is that? Yeah, 1 square. So just by happen chance, we've now got a lovely Roman line again. And that is the end of the Roman turn, but I'm pretty sure that they can call what's called homunculus S now, because I'm pretty sure they've taken the British Army over their breakpoint. So let's just show you that. Right, so here is the British command board, and these are all the cards that they've collected so far. I mean, looking at the board, this is another thing about the game, that there's an awful lot to keep in your head. It's quite a difficult game to master. It's quite complex, but I've still got 4 unspent points here, which I might have been able to make better use of during the game. What I could do at this point, the Romans have declared homunculus S, which means they want to get the British player to reveal the value on here in the hope that it's gone over 18, in which case the game is over. But the British could delay that briefly. Once per game you're allowed to do this, is to move a generalship point to the strategy box and then spend that, and then you don't have to reveal your cards until the next time the Romans declare. So it's only going to delay it by 1 turn. That would be worth doing if the game was more even, but the Romans have only got 2 setback cards, so they're going to have a maximum of 6 scored there. So they're not going to be even kind of fatigued. They have to get to, well, they would be fatigued if they had 6, but 5, and they're not. So what I'm saying anyway is there's no point in the the British wasting that point now to put this off. They're just going to have to hope there are lots of low value cards here, and they haven't been beaten yet. So let's top them all up. So 6, that's not a good start. 7, that's even worse. That's 13, and another 6. So just in those 3 cards alone, that's taking them up to 19. So they're over their break point. 20, 21, 22, 23, 26, 26, 27, 27, 27. So 27. So the game is well and truly over, with the Romans having smashed the Britons. So let's just give you a little summary. Right, there we go then. Let's view with most of the units that are remaining on the table in view. It kind of played out, as the historic event. I mean, obviously Watling Street was a massive victory for the Romans. Don't think it necessarily played out as the scenario intended. I mean, it's partly to do with the fact, as I was saying, about the dimensions of the table and the dimensions of those forested or wooded areas. Are they woods? Are they forests? How much of the table do they take up? How much room on the flanks does it allow the Britons to, envelop the Romans rather than have to just hit them head on? I think the intention of the scenario was that the Romans just attack head on and don't have much flanking, flexibility. But obviously, because in this game that they did, I tried to get the chariots around the rear of the Romans, and that probably would have worked quite well had the Romans stayed put as they did historically until the Britons, were broken in their frontal assault. But what happened was that the Romans then had to move forward in order to bring about that frontal assault, to sort of preempt it, to make sure that it happened before the chariots got into place. And the chariots would have had, another move or two, another turn or two, and they would have really clobbered the Roman legion. But as it was, they just arrived too late. I mean, they did have 3 turns at the beginning where they didn't move at all, so it was all down to that. And other than that, it went according to history that the Britons just got totally, swamped in the end. I think brilliant game. Visually, it has that kind of mass effect. So it's like you're looking down from a plane or something like that on the battlefield, rather than bringing out the features of individual figures and for it having an aesthetic appeal that way. But I think the game mechanism itself works really well. I mean, I know a lot of people don't like playing on grids or hexes or things like that, but you don't really see the grid lines in this game, especially on this map. And the pieces do move, the units do move about a little bit like they're on a chessboard, but I think when you're playing at this scale, the scale where you're representing tens of thousands of figures on a table rather than few thousands or even a few hundreds, that kind of gridded mechanism works fine for me. And I just love the challenges that this game presents. Even playing against myself, I was finding it hard to make the right choices and the right decisions, and good generalship can win you the game. So it's partly down to luck, but a lot of it is down to your strategic decisions and your the choices you make during the game and how you respond to crises. So hope you enjoyed that, and Thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you on the next video. Bye for now.